Those of you that were present at our first symposium in September 2017 might recall how our keynote speaker, Mrs. Wilke Slingeland, dedicated the second night of the symposium to the special role of women in the quest for good governance. In this light, it might not be surprising that our current Prime Minister, being the first female head of state in Aruba, put as the most important goal of her cabinet good governance and integrity. Apparently, this was necessary as the previous decades of governance resulted in a catastrophic situation. Those years of governance were carried by the famous slogan from 1995, which was, "Good governance is bad politics." Or in other words, politics is only good as long as we practice bad governance. So, will the new coalition government be able to transform the old slogan to a new one, where good governance also means good politics? And is this new government going to change the tradition of neglecting warnings, opinions, and recommendations from national and international institutions which have so many specialized expertise? The most appropriate person to give you some insight in this is the Prime Minister of Aruba. So, may I present to you Mrs. Evelyn Wever Croes, who also did not hesitate one moment in accepting our invitation. To you all, Mrs. Evelyn Wever Croes, Prime Minister of Aruba.
His Excellency, the Governor of Aruba, Mr. Alfonso Boekhout, the Chairman of the Parliament of Aruba, Mr. Adi Thijssen, members of Parliament present, colleague ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to start by congratulating the Foundation Deugdelijk Bestuur Aruba in collaboration with the University of Aruba for organizing this very important symposium. And I thank you, of course, for giving me the opportunity to speak before you this evening. It's a real honor. Our government, Cabinet Wever Croes, was formed on the 17th of November 2017. Tomorrow will be 14 months of this date. We formed this cabinet after intense negotiations between political parties to form a coalition. We could have formed with a minimum of 11 seats in parliament, but we managed to reach an agreement with 3 parties, creating a broader majority with 12 seats in parliament. Each party has its own philosophy, its own vision, its own main areas of focus. But we agreed to focus on what unites us instead of focusing on what divides us. And one of the important topics that united us was integrity. I started a path to integrity from the opposition seats in the year 2014. Then, together with my colleague here, the President of Parliament, Mr. Adi Thijssen, we drafted a note called Integrity, Doing the Right Thing Even When No One is Watching. In this note, we analyzed the legislation that was missing in Aruba, and we proposed a path to follow towards integrity in Aruba. Not much could be achieved from the opposition in that time, but the road was paved. And now, being in government, we have the opportunity to apply the recommendations made. We see integrity violations all over the world. And unfortunately, Aruba is no exception. One of my nephews, Brian, he is a European law student in Maastricht, has shown a lot of interest on this integrity pathway of Aruba. And last night, he has helped me to make a list of integrity violations by politicians in recent years. In 1 hour time research, he had the 1 hour, I didn't. He had compiled a list of up to 22 cases of all continents of the earth. Most integrity violations concerned corruption, financial mismanagement, use of public funds for private means, sexual misconduct issues, credit card fraud, prostitution, pedophilia, interference with election results. So it is really not a problem that we only see in Aruba. But what about if we all work together to ensure that integrity violations never again occur in Aruba? I think that that is the main reason that we are here this evening, that you took time to come to this symposium this evening. In the coalition agreement, which led to the government program Junto pa Aruba, Together for Aruba, Chapter 1 reads, good governance, integrity, and transparency. Integrity was point number 1. And why? Because the people of Aruba have lost faith and confidence in politics and in government. Because integrity violations were often accepted. Because too often we looked away when it concerned integrity violations. Because persons of integrity within the public administration felt that they were not supported. Because, like we just have seen, 70% of the people of Aruba or more are convinced that there is widespread corruption in Aruba. And the new government wanted to change this. We want to gain the confidence of the people again. We want to gain the confidence and the credibility internationally, not only within the kingdom, but also with the financial institutions like the IMF and the rating agencies. And therefore, we knew that integrity needed to be put very high on the political agenda. And most important, there was consensus. And inspired, unfortunately, by recent events in our Dushi Aruba, we decided that the moment to act is now. So, this is what we will do. I don't know who is handling the sheets, but if I can get the next sheet, please. Okay. This is what we will do. These are the main objectives that we're working towards. The first one is to institute the Bureau of Integrity. The second one, to institute the Chamber of Integrity. That's another body, different than the Bureau. The third is to institute an integrity supervisory body for state-owned companies and semi-public entities, and to introduce a uniform corporate governance code. And the fourth, to ratify the anti-corruption treaty. I will elaborate shortly on each of the 4 main objectives. The first one, to institute a Bureau of Integrity. And on this, we have booked progress. The Bureau of Integrity, Bureau Integriteit Aruba, BIA, has the task of raising awareness in the public administration and monitor integrity within the public and the semi-public services up to the ministers. This bureau will also be, or have, a hotline for the citizens of Aruba to file complaints or report integrity violations. First, we will start only within the public sector, but we aim to expand and receive also complaints and reports on integrity violations in the private sector in the future. To realize this vision, we could not have done it alone. We instituted a working group early in 2018. This working group consisted of the Prosecutor General, who was very willing to help in this process, the National Security Service of Aruba, the Veiligheidsdienst Aruba VDA, the Department of Human Resource of Aruba, and the Central Accounting Department of Aruba, Centrale Accountantsdienst. And we have made good progress since then. We have instituted the Bureau of Integrity on October the 1st, 2018, and we have appointed Mrs. Ameline Flaneging as the person responsible for setting up the Bureau, and this should be done by April, May of this year. Mrs. Flanagan works at the central bank, and we are very thankful to the central bank for having given her the opportunity to help us with this important task. We consider the central bank a very important ally in the path towards integrity and in the fight against corruption. So this is the first, the Bureau of Integrity. The recruitment process for a director of this bureau will start next week, and the job vacancies will be published also next week. The hiring, in case you're wondering, will not be in the hands of the government to make sure that the appointments are as objective as possible. The awareness programs will start soon, and once the Bureau is staffed, the first phone calls can be received with the complaints and reports on integrity violation. What will this Bureau do with these reports and complaints? This Bureau will first review each complaint and then refer the complaint to be investigated by the department which has to do the investigation. It's either the Human Resource Department or the Landsrecherche, het Openbaar Ministerie. So this Bureau will receive the reports and the Bureau will refer them, and the Bureau will follow up to make sure that each complaint or report is investigated. This Bureau will be as autonomous as possible and will have a legal framework. Why? Because we want to make it almost impossible, or at least very difficult, for any other government in the future to eliminate this Bureau. And only by creating a good legal framework, we can guarantee the sustainability and durability of this Bureau. And as I mentioned, this Bureau will be up and running by April and May of this year. That is the first one. The second one, the Chamber of Integrity, and this is another entity. The main task of this chamber is to scrutinize and to review decisions of the government. For example, public procurement. We have requested the Advisory Council of Aruba, the Raad van Advies, to advise us how to most efficiently institute this chamber. And in order for this chamber to be able to review the decisions made by the government, important legislation needs to be amended or to be introduced. One of those is the procurement rules on the financial legislation, de openbare aanbestedingen in de comptabiliteitsverordening. These need to be amended. The draft has already been sent to Parliament and is planned to be handled in Parliament in the first half of this year. Another very important legislation is the legislation on the financing of political parties, and this needs to be introduced. And I'm very honored to see that the Parliament has taken a very crucial role in this path towards integrity as well. And that members of Parliament, we have here Mr. Vrolijk, one of the initiative namers, one that took the initiative. They drafted this legislation, and it is also in the process of being handled, hopefully in the first half of this year. And another very important legislation is the legislation on the screening and the integrity of the members of Parliament and ministers that needs to be introduced. And this is also an initiative of the Parliament of Aruba, already drafted within, already submitted to the Raad van Advies, the Advisory Council, and also planned to be handled in Parliament in the first half of this year. I have also instituted a committee in charge with strengthening the democratic system of Aruba, Commissie Versterking Democratisch Bestel Aruba. And this committee will present to the government proposals, advices, how to strengthen and to solidify the democratic institutions. They were already mentioned. We are talking about the Advisory Council, Raad van Advies, the Algemene Rekenkamer, the Parliament of Aruba, and the Ombudsman that will be introduced as well. They are also assisting in the institution of the Ombudsman. We are walking the path towards Integrity Chamber as much as possible also together with Curaçao and St. Maarten. Because of the small scale of our islands, we will be much stronger if we work together and if we exchange experts to staff the several chambers. And in the second half of 2019 of this year, we expect to institute this chamber and to start the recruitment of the members of the chamber. To be more specific, in the third quarter of this year. So that is the second one. And then the third one. We will institute the Integrity Supervisory Body for state-owned companies and semi-public entities. And we will introduce a uniform corporate governance code. The body that we intend to institute will provide this uniform corporate governance code for government entities. We have started with making an inventory of the different corporate governance codes. We will inventorize what has already been done on this field, and the goal is to match everything as much as possible, and where necessary, taking into account the characteristics of each company to achieve a national ordinance on corporate governance, as you already heard by the central bank. And in addition, we aim in the coming months to institute a body responsible for monitoring and the standardization of the public entities. This will be an independent administrative authority that gives the government solicited and unsolicited advice and oversees the various areas on the state-owned companies. This body will also advise on the appointment and dismissal of members of the various boards of directors of the state-owned companies and the semi-public entities. And the aim is to finalize the preparation in the second half of this year, more specific, the fourth quarter of this year. And then the fourth main objective is to ratify the Anti-Corruption Treaty. Aruba has not ratified this treaty yet. We are working towards this by checking off a list to be complied with before we can ratify. The Bureau of Integrity, the hotline for reports and complaints, the several legislations are part of this process as well. Once these objectives are reached, we can finally ratify the Anti-Corruption Treaty. And these are the main objectives that we have to accomplish within this year. The Bureau of Integrity, the Chamber of Integrity, the Integrity Supervisory Body for the state-owned companies, and the ratification of the Anti-Corruption Treaty. But of course, this will not be enough. We know that we have to take additional actions to guarantee integrity on the long run, especially for it to be sustainable. The subsidiary actions include, among others, a legislation for whistleblowers, investing in e-government, the tax reform we already started, and further investment in law enforcement, in human resource policy, and the department depoliticize the appointment of public employees. The legislation for whistleblowers needs to grant protection to those complaining or reporting integrity violations. Of course, we're not talking about rumors, we are talking about solid complaints. The second, investing in e-government. Why? Because we do not just want to, but we need to make government procedures more transparent, so we leave less and less space for corruption. And I'm proud to announce that we have partnered up with Estonia, the country leading in e-government. We have convinced the e-Government Institute of Estonia that we are a serious partner, and they are assisting us in this path. And as we speak, a delegation of Aruba is having the first training session in Estonia to kick off the Aruba e-government movement. And upon their return, they will give the further trainings here. The aim is to improve government service towards the citizens and to have a more transparent and efficient government. The tax reform. The tax reform is aimed to simplify the tax code, to improve the tax compliance. The first phase of the tax reform was completed last year, And we are now working towards the second phase by mid of this year. And we aim to finalize the tax reform mid-2020. And by then, we hope to have a very efficient tax system in place, but especially a more transparent tax system. Investing in law enforcement and human resource departments of the government, and that is of course important in order for these departments to be able to conduct investigations of integrity violations that are reported. Because otherwise, we receive the reports and we do not do anything with it. That is not an option. We have to invest in our human resource policy, and we have to depoliticize as much as possible the appointment of public employees. These subsidiary actions will be undertaken in the course of this year and the next year. So, this is what we are doing and what we will do. But as with everything in life, the government cannot do this alone. We need to do this together. For corruption to take place, two parties are needed. The one receiving the bribe, but also the one paying the bribe. So, what do we expect from you? Basically the same. We expect for the citizen of Aruba not to engage in corruption. We expect the citizen of Aruba not to cut lines or engage into bribing public officers nor ministers. We expect from the citizens of Aruba to follow procedures. We expect the citizen of Aruba to report integrity violations. And we expect the citizen of Aruba to hold each other accountable. And we are not there yet. We are not yet where we need to be, but we have made important steps. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we did not manage to have everything on rails within the first year in government because, unfortunately, there were other priorities that needed also very urgent attention. One of them is keeping Aruba outside of the danger zone of financial bankruptcy, or to avoid another instruction or kabay from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We were successful up until now in this. And now that we have new financial arrangements in place, the attention focused is on realizing these objectives on the area of integrity. And 2019 will be the year in which we raise the level of awareness within the public administration, and the year in which we will finalize the necessary legislation. 2020 will be the year in which we will hold all those violating integrity codes accountable. And I'm confident that we will succeed. You know why? Because we have a public prosecutor's office and a police department that have shown that high-level corruption investigations can be conducted and can be taken to court also in Aruba, as we all unfortunately could have seen this week. And I'm confident that we will succeed because we have a parliament that is working very different than in the past years. A difference of almost night and day. Debates are conducted on a very professional level, and the members of parliament are sometimes very critical of the policy of the government. This parliament is really exercising its control function very seriously. But it's not only the prosecutor's office and the parliament. It's because of NGOs and partners like the Foundation Deugdelijk Bestuur Aruba and the University of Aruba. We consider these foundations, these NGOs, partner in the fight against corruption, as is also the central bank. And last and certainly not least, I'm very confident that we will be successful in this fight against corruption because we have citizens like you, people that take the time to attend symposia like this one. You are our most important critics. You keep us on the right track. And we do this because you want this and because Aruba deserves this. And these, ladies and gentlemen, are very historic moments. We are writing a new chapter in the history of our country. Let's work together to make this a real successful chapter and a successful endeavor, so that when our future generations look back at this time, they will always know that we started this new chapter in the history of Aruba, the path towards good government and integrity. And let yourself always be guided by integrity, by doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Prime Minister. And I must admit that I am quite impressed with the two presentations that we have just had, where we can see a kind of change of hearts. Because I think it's the first time in the history of Aruba that we had the leaders of such important institutions, the Central Bank of Aruba and the government, that complied with the request of a civic movement to come and talk about such an important issue. Because we all know, since, you could say, the beginning of status aparte, maybe 2 years afterwards, when the first big problems were more or less resolved, that things started to go wrong. And we all knew that it was getting worse. And at a certain moment, so many people lost hope and thought things can't be changed anymore. Well, I think we see a beginning of a change. And I'm hopeful, just like our Prime Minister, that working together, putting all our forces, all our insights and all our inspirations together to really make it to a more or less corrupt-free Aruba. I think that is the best thing we can offer to our kids and our whole community. We have come now until the half of the first part of tonight. As I told before, we are going on with, let's say, two men who are going to talk about the legal thing. But before that, we have a little surprise for you. Because, as you know, with me, the most beautiful song in Aruba is our national anthem. Because it was made with the love of two of our cultural fathers, which were Wever and Spadulampe, who wrote the song and who composed it. And all the people that sing it all the time again, sing it with the same love that those people felt when they made it. But they are not the only ones that love our little island. So many tourists come here year after year, sometimes for decades, and they have the same love for Aruba. And some of them have tried to express it in the same way that Wever and Spadulampe has done by means of a song. And we chose one song that really impressed us very much. It was written by a Dutch technical assistant to Aruba who lived here some years. And when he was leaving Aruba, he wanted to leave like a little souvenir from him to the island of Aruba as a thank you for all the things that he experienced. I want to present to you the song under the name of Harmony and Contrast, but more people know it as the Yamanota.
De blauwe zee, het witte strand, en een cactus zomaar aan de kant, maar ook de Noordkust, ruig en woest. Het zijn contrasten zeker, maar het mag op Aruba naast elkaar. Een limousine, een stuk oud roest. Poco poco, niemand heeft haast, rondangerend weggeraast, maar moet er iemand oversteken. Dan blijft men rustig even staan, met weliswaar de boombox aan, en is de haast opeens geweken. En staande op de Yamanota zag ik dit kleine eiland aan. Wat ik er zag was zoveel schoonheid, en dat mag nooit verloren gaan. De hooiberg en de Franse pas, de arikok, het struikgewas, met vergezichten wonderschoon. Maar hele stukken weggevaagd, zelfs oude bomen omgezaagd, dat is toch echt niet meer gewoon. Een kwieboom, een leguaan, gelukkig dat die nog bestaan, en ook de waterpannenbomen. Maar pas toch op, het wordt fataal, als jou in naam van het kapitaal dat alles zou worden ontnomen. En staande op de Yamanota zag ik dit kleine eiland aan. Wat ik er zag was zoveel schoonheid, en dat mag nooit verloren gaan. Het Spaans lagoen en ook de brug, dat zie ik graag nog eens terug. De village en oranje stad, prachtige vissen en koraal. Aruba heeft het allemaal, en Boca Prins, wat mooi is dat. Een vissersboten, een luxe jacht, een flamboyant in volle pracht. Gebroken flessen, resten eten. Helaas, ook dat komt nog wel voor, maar de verbetering zet door. Er wordt straks niets meer neergesmeten. En staande op de Yamanota zag ik dit kleine eiland aan. Wat ik er zag was zoveel schoonheid, en dat mag nooit verloren gaan. En weer een nieuwe shoppingmall, met vlak aan zee een grote hal, want de vooruitgang staat niet stil. Dan kijk ik toch veel liever naar een felgekleurd blikje chipa, maar dat is nou eenmaal het verschil. Voor de loketten heb ik lang gewacht, het gaat steeds anders dan je dacht. Maak je niet druk, het zal niet baten. Ik heb hier veel geduld geleerd, een heleboel geaccepteerd, zelfs winkels waar je Spaans moet praten. En staande op de Yamanota zag ik dit kleine eiland aan. Wat ik er zag was zoveel schoonheid, en dat mag nooit verloren gaan. Voordat de jet vertrekken gaat, mijn laatste goed bedoelde raad: denk met respect aan je natuur, opdat je steeds weer wordt verrast door het harmonische contrast. Wees daarin alsjeblieft secuur. Nu, Mashadanki, ik moet weer terug. Ajo, het ging toch veel te vlug. Maar wat ik zeker meen te weten, deze herinnering gaat mee. En daar ver weg over de zee zal ik Aruba nooit vergeten. En staande op de Yamanota zag ik dit kleine eiland aan. Wat ik er zag was zoveel schoonheid, hoe lang zal dat blijven bestaan?